They came with silver tongues and golden promises. 3 ships, smooth as obsidian and silent as ghosts, drifted into Earth's orbit one late November evening. No threat, no warning, just presence. Global satellites caught them at once. Everyone held their breath. The world froze in anticipation. No cities were leveled, no death rays fired. Instead, they spoke. Their message? Unity, cooperation, harmony. They called themselves the Vulnari Collective, a council of 17 alien civilizations claiming to act as the moral compass of the galaxy. And they'd finally noticed Earth. Their emissary, a thin, gray-skinned being named Thur, addressed the UN from orbit via a global broadcast. It didn't speak like a conqueror, but like a patient teacher disappointed in a messy student. "You are young," Thur said, "emotionally volatile, technologically reckless, environmentally ignorant, and yet interesting." He paused, head tilted like a disappointed parent. "You've drawn attention, humans. Your wars, your broadcasts, your nuclear tantrums. The galaxy has concerns. So we come bearing structure, guidance, peace. Peace, as if Earth had been begging for it, as if they were the ones bleeding from our centuries of struggle." Their terms were wrapped in politeness and pseudo-kindness, but men like me knew what it was. Soft colonization. The Vulnari weren't conquerors, they were manipulators. And they thought we'd kneel because they came with diplomacy instead of guns. They didn't count on the CHAIN directive. Didn't count on me. My name is Cole Mercer, retired major, U.S. Special Forces, now working deep within the Cold Forge Initiative. That's the project where humanity's worst nightmares and wildest ambitions got welded together, off the books, off the grid. And that's where we built it. Project Colossus. 120 meters tall. 200 tons of alloyed vengeance, designed in silence, hidden beneath Antarctic ice. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't sleek. It was ugly, brutal, human. They warned us this might happen. Some nerd in a black tie once called it xenosoft imperialism. We just called it insurance. The thing about humans is, we don't play by intergalactic etiquette. We don't harmonize our way out of conflict. We punch through it. And if someone tries to dress up chains in silk and call it peace, we call it what it is, submission. And men like me don't submit. We build monsters. I was called back in just 48 hours after the broadcast. Cold Forge was humming with nervous energy. Lights blazed. Alarms blinked quietly. Engineers sweated over last-minute adjustments, while diplomats scrambled to buy time. The alien fleet was holding position. For now. I stepped into command and saw the general. He didn't look up, just muttered, "Mercer, it's time." 3 words. They dropped in my gut like bricks. He handed me the neural sync chip. Cold. Heavy. Custom fit for my spine. Vulnari just demanded partial jurisdiction over our orbital weapon systems, called it a show of trust. The general snorted. "What do we send in reply?" I didn't say a word. Just took the chip, nodded once, and headed for the pod. 10 floors down, I stood in front of Colossus-1. It wasn't a machine. It was a message, one forged from steel, sweat, and every ugly human lesson we've ever learned the hard way. "You sure you want to do this, Cole?" one of the techs asked, voice shaking. I stared up at the towering beast, shoulders like battleships, hands like wrecking balls, eyes glowing amber with raw hatred coded into its AI. I smirked. We didn't build it for peace talks. Then I slid into the cradle. The chip locked in. Pain lanced down my spine. Neural sync flooded my brain. A moment later, my heartbeat wasn't just mine. It was ours. Colossus opened its eyes, and Earth sent its reply. The sync always hit like a freight train. Your brain expands, your heartbeat echoes through steel and composite plating, and suddenly your thoughts aren't whispers in your own skull. They're cannon fire behind metal eyes. I felt the Colossus stretch before I ever moved. Power surged through its limbs like thunder. Each joint hissed with pressure equalizers. Outside, the launch silo cracked open in slow hydraulics, bathing us in the cold blue shimmer of the Antarctic sky. A storm churned over the southern pole. Fitting. Earth was bracing itself for something unnatural. "Colossus 1 online," came a voice through comms. "Neural lock achieved. Pilot Mercer status?" My mouth didn't move. The words just echoed through the system, translated into cold, mechanical confidence. "Ready to send the message." Down below, the base was in chaos. Techs running drills, officers shouting coordinates, radar arrays spinning in frantic loops. The alien fleet still hovered in geosynchronous orbit, just far enough to seem polite, close enough to remind us who really had the high ground. They had no idea what was coming. I took my first step. The ground shuddered. Miles away, ice cracked under the pressure. Cameras zoomed in from every major network. Satellites pivoted. Whole populations held their breath. And in orbit, the Vulnari fleet adjusted slightly, almost like they were leaning forward, watching. Their arrogance was going to cost them. The first to panic weren't the aliens. It was Earth's own politicians. Diplomats stormed into comms rooms screaming bloody murder. The UN General Assembly started emergency sessions. Some jackass prime minister tried to call it a premature escalation. The President of the United States, however, said nothing. Because she knew. She'd signed the directive. CHAIN didn't operate under democracy. It operated under necessity. Cold human aggression integrated network. A last resort built in secrecy, with sign-off from only the highest levels of leadership. We never wanted it. We never wanted to need it. But Earth didn't have the luxury of idealism anymore. The moment the Vulnari said partial jurisdiction, we knew where this was going. First, our weapons. Then, our governments. Then, our history, our culture, until all of humanity was a hollowed-out version of what some Xeno Council considered acceptable. No thanks. I took another step, then another. Each one faster. More fluid. The cold air screamed past as I pushed Colossus into a run, leaping from the glacier edge and into the launch rail that stretched 40 miles downrange toward the orbital lift cannon. It was buried under fake mining equipment, decades in the making. As I locked into the mag line, Earth trembled. Not with fear, but with will. We'd been underestimated for the last time. The alien ships began to respond when I was halfway down the launch rail, my HUD lit up with interference. "Pilot Mercer, incoming signal from Vulnari primary vessel, broadcasting in 10 dialects. They want to speak." I ignored it. "Mercer, command here. They're demanding an explanation. They say this looks hostile." "Looks hostile?" I barked back through the system. "Tell them this is hostile." Silence on the line. Then the general himself came back. "Copy that." There was a cold satisfaction in his voice. A moment later, my forward trajectory reached the cannon gate. Inside, the chamber pulsed with energy. They'd told us it wouldn't work. They said the mass was too great, the risk too high. But I'd personally helped the engineers design it. Colossus wasn't just armor and rage. It was meant to fly, and now it would. "Final override," I muttered. "Colossus 1 requesting orbital launch. Target, Vulnari command vessel." A voice came back, shaky, young, terrified. "God help us all." I leaned forward. "Number just help me aim." The cannon fired. The entire sky ripped open. A seismic wave shattered the crust of surrounding ice sheets. Steam exploded from the rails. Fire spiraled up into the clouds, and I shot into the sky with one goal and one target: show them what humans really are. The blackness of space wasn't silent through Colossus. The sensors hummed, vibrated, screamed under G-force. I could see the curvature of the Earth behind me, see the burning atmosphere swirl off my frame like smoke from a god's warhammer. And up ahead, those sleek, floating liars. 17 ships, each one shaped like a predator wearing jewelry. They weren't warships, not in the traditional sense. But they had defenses: drones, energy fields, magnetic disruptors. The problem was, they were built to subdue, not to survive a charging steel titan driven by human rage. Engaging Vulnari flagship, I said flatly. Advise all civilian craft to clear orbit in Sector Kappa 6. There was a pause on comms. Then the general's voice. Make it count. I crashed through their outer defense grid like it was made of tinfoil. Drones swarmed. I caught 2 mid-flight and slammed them into a third, scattering metal and plasma. Energy fields pulsed across their hulls, trying to redirect my trajectory. Didn't work. The Colossus burned too hot. Too fast. One of their frigates tried to intercept. I grabbed its side, flipped mid-thrust, and used it as a battering ram to crash into the flagship's outer hull. Metal screamed. I tore through it. Now I was inside. Alien corridors stretched in curves and violet light. Gravity distorted. Alarms blared in some alien frequency that grated against the spine. Dozens of Vulnari foot soldiers flooded the interior. Tall, thin, elegant, all speed and neural comms. Didn't matter. I activated the internal servos. Colossus's arms snapped out wide. 2 sonic blades emerged from its forearms, vibrating at frequencies strong enough to slice concrete. I didn't fight them like soldiers. I cleared them like vermin. They screamed in signals I didn't care to understand. This wasn't diplomacy. This was humanity giving a final, brutal reply. We see your peace, and we raise you war. I reached the command chamber. Thur was there, still calm, still dressed like some galactic monk. Behind him floated 10 other ambassadors, ethereal, translucent, too fragile for the gravity they'd imposed. He looked at me through the Colossus's cracked visor. No fear, just disappointment. You had a choice, human, he said into the chamber. Colossus translated automatically. You could have elevated yourselves. You could have grown past this barbarism. I took one step closer. The floor buckled. I responded through external speakers. And you could have left us the hell alone. Thur tilted his head. We gave you an option. No, I growled. You gave us a leash. Then I raised the Colossus's arm, charged the fusion core. And I made my statement. The flagship ruptured in 3 directions. I jumped, freefall into vacuum. No sound, no gravity, just drifting wreckage and the slow-motion beauty of chaos. Back on Earth, people would be screaming, cheering, weeping, all of it. But up here? Silence. Cold satisfaction. 1 ship down, 17 to go. Except they didn't retaliate. They backed off. The entire Vulnari formation rotated in slow, synchronized withdrawal. My comms exploded. Mercer, they're pulling out. Repeat, Vulnari ships are pulling back into high orbit. I grinned, teeth bloody from the strain. Yeah, they finally got the message. Down on Earth, the world was split. Some leaders condemned me. Others declared a planetary holiday. Protesters marched with signs reading Mercer the Mad. Others painted my face on walls next to slogans like, humanity answers in fire. But none of them mattered. What mattered was that the Vulnari didn't return. Not for weeks. Then, finally, one message came through. A single sentence. No threats, no lectures. The human species is not yet ready, but it is not to be underestimated. Damn right. They called me back to Earth in a recovery pod 3 days later. My body was broken, spine refused, organs bleeding, nerves fried from the neural feedback. But I didn't care. I watched the sky from a hospital window. Blue, alive, angry. And I smiled. Because out there in the stars, the message had been sent. We're not here to obey. We're here to survive. They say heroes come home to parades. I came back in a reinforced trauma pod, sedated, strapped down, and half dead. My spine was stabilized with carbon fiber plating. One eye refused to track properly. Every muscle below my neck screamed with delayed neural feedback. If the nurses hadn't doped me up like a test lab chimp, I might have tried to stand just out of sheer habit. Didn't matter. I'd made it back. And Earth had changed in the 3 days I'd been drifting in orbit. The hospital was deep beneath NORAD's new eastern wing, 3 floors below the classified command vaults. Outside my glass room, guards stood with rifles they weren't qualified to use and eyes that didn't blink often enough. They weren't there to protect me. They were there in case someone ordered them to end me. First visitor wasn't family, wasn't the president, wasn't even my commanding officer. It was a suit, polished, thin, smiling with all teeth, no warmth, a name I didn't ask for and didn't need. He sat down beside the glass, cleared his throat, and said, "You started something we're not sure how to finish." I stared back, one eye still half blurred. "You're welcome." His smile didn't move. "We're tracking 67 alien broadcasts right now. Some are Vulnari splinters. Some aren't even part of their collective. They're just watching." "Good." He raised a brow. "Good." Means they're scared. He leaned in. "Or it means you've made us a target." The next day, the president finally showed up. No cameras, no press, just her, 2 Secret Service ghosts, and a sigh that said she hadn't slept since the launch. "Mercer," she said, sitting beside the bed, "you gave Earth its first interstellar enemy." I grinned. "They started it." She didn't smile back. "They've pulled their main fleet, but smaller diplomatic crafts are still hovering in deep orbit, observing, gathering data. They're calling your actions a savage anomaly. Let them. You killed 900 delegates." I looked her dead in the eye. "I killed one message." She was silent for a while. Then she said, "Do you know what happened in Mumbai last night?" I shook my head. She tapped a screen. A grainy satellite image came up. A crater. Smoke. Blue fire still smoldering in the core. "Something came down. Not Vulnari. Not ours. We don't know what. But 3 city blocks disintegrated. Witnesses say it wasn't an attack. It was an arrival." My chest tightened. "Another species?" "We think so. No formal communication. No diplomatic channel. Just presence." She looked me over, every scar, every wire still stuck into my arms. "We're not ready for what you started, Cole, but we don't get to go back now." They moved me to a cold forge recovery bay after that. No sunlight, no soft walls, just concrete, steel, and isolation. I preferred it that way. They still had Colossus locked underground, docked like a sleeping monster, steam curling from its vents. Engineers circled it like it was a holy relic, whispering about its structural integrity and reaction time. None of them knew what came next. But I did, because while the world argued about what I'd done, others were watching. A week later, the Vulnari sent another transmission. This time it was encrypted, direct, and private. To me. The techs freaked when they saw it. It didn't go to any nation's relay hub. It tunneled through old defense satellite systems we'd buried in the Cold War. Systems no one had touched in decades. They knew our bones. I sat in the chamber while the message played. Thir again. His face was different this time. Not disappointed, not calm. Wounded. "You believe yourself victorious," he said, his voice echoing in a deep, low pulse. "But you have not won. You've simply declared your nature." The screen flickered. Footage of me ripping through his flagship played behind his eyes like some twisted slideshow. "You are dangerous, predictably violent, unwilling to evolve." He paused, his head tilted slightly. "That is why others will come, not with diplomacy, not with unity, but with tests." My blood ran cold. "The galaxy breeds things that feed on chaos, Mercer. You have called them." Then the feed cut. No signature, no return channel, just a dark room and the cold realization that my war wasn't over. It had just woken something worse. 3 days later, it landed. Not in New York, not in London, not in Beijing. No, this thing chose the middle of nowhere, a South African desert, uninhabited and dry enough to erase footprints before they cooled. The craft wasn't a ship, not in the way ships were meant to fly. It looked grown, not built, organic plating, black spines curled around a core that pulsed like a dying heart. It didn't glow, it leaked light, and when teams approached, it didn't respond, until someone got close enough to breathe on it. Then it unfolded. One movement, no warning, and it took 30 men. No sound, no blood. They were just gone. The footage hit Cold Forge within the hour. I watched it on loop. The way it moved, the way it knew. Not just aggression, not just defense. Assessment. The new visitor wasn't here to talk. It was here to see what kind of animal had barked loud enough to shatter a galactic order. They brought me to the war room 2 hours later, sat me down beside generals I didn't recognize and scientists who looked like they hadn't eaten in days. On the screen, the creature, still parked in that desert, still pulsing. The president stood at the front, no security this time, just her voice. "This isn't diplomacy anymore. This is pressure." One of the scientists chimed in. "We believe it's a probe, a biological one, grown to adapt, to assess threat level. Our drones are picking up frequency patterns that match no known comm structures." "Then how do we respond?" someone asked. She looked at me. "We send a bigger message." I stood. Colossus. They launched me 12 hours later. This time I wasn't aiming at orbit. This time I was going straight to Earth's dirt. The South African sand cracked under Colossus's impact. Miles of it turned to glass from the pressure. I stood there, 120 meters tall, staring at a living ship made of black bone and muscle. It turned, it watched me, and I felt it. Not fear, not hate. Curiosity. That's when I knew this wasn't the real enemy. This was the first scout. Colossus stepped forward. The creature unfolded like a flower made of blades. No face, no eyes, just a core that pulsed in time with some alien rhythm. It didn't speak. So I did. "This is Earth," I said, voice booming through Colossus' chest. "This is your warning." It charged. And for the first time, I felt outmatched. It moved like a shadow wrapped in lightning. Claws ripped into my shoulder plate before I could bring the arm up. Sparks flew. Internal hydraulics screamed. The HUD flashed warnings in red across my eyes. I countered with a left hook, slamming into what felt like liquid stone. It bent but didn't break. I deployed the sonic blade, drove it into its side. It shrieked. Not with sound, with data. A wave of images hit my mind. Planets burning, stars swallowed, languages screaming across dimensions. My skull felt like it was tearing open. And then it reformed. The wound closed in seconds. Back at command, they screamed in my ear. "Mercer, abort! It's adapting! It's learning your tech!" I looked at the thing through cracked lenses. Number not adapting. Studying. Every move I made, it didn't just counter, it absorbed. I was a test, nothing more. I triggered the failsafe. Disengaging AI limiter. A warning blared through the system. "Are you sure? Core systems may overheat." Yes. Fusion core unlocked. Colossus burned brighter than ever. I wasn't piloting anymore. I was merged. A symbiosis of rage and steel. A titan forged by generations of war. And I was done being studied. I slammed into the creature with everything. Fists, blades, shoulders, full-thrust rocket impact. I drove it into the sand, cracked its chest, forced the blade deeper. It screamed again. This time it echoed. From the sky, I looked up, and I saw them. Not one, not two. Dozens. All descending, all shaped like that first one, all pulsing in sync. I whispered into comms. "We have a problem." Command didn't reply. I don't think they could, because humanity had lit a flare into the stars, and something other had seen it. The sky above South Africa turned black, not night black, swarm black. They descended like falling stars with no flame, organic, smooth, silent, each one just like the first. No weapons visible, no obvious propulsion. They floated like they belonged to the air, like gravity bent to them instead of the other way around. Back at Cold Forge, the feed cut out for 3 full seconds. When it came back, all you could hear was screaming, not from civilians, from command staff, from soldiers, from people trained to look death in the face and call it protocol. I stood there inside Colossus, fusion core burning like a sun beneath my chest, with the first creature still impaled beneath my boots. It wasn't dying. It wasn't even struggling. It was waiting, because the real threat had arrived. A voice came through my comms, raw, static-filled, strained under some external interference. "Mercer, we count 37 incoming life forms. 42. 49. Shit, it's a full-scale insertion. They're deploying probes by the dozen." Then a deeper voice, one I hadn't heard in weeks, the general. "Mercer, listen carefully. The President just activated Sky Protocol." My blood ran cold. Sky Protocol wasn't a defense plan. It was a burial order. Sky Protocol was meant for extinction events. If Earth was ever invaded by something that couldn't be reasoned with or stopped, the failsafe was to seal off the planet. Not protect it, but contain it. That meant detonating orbital debris fields, collapsing space gates, and destroying every off-world comm link. The plan assumed that if we couldn't stop the threat, we sure as hell wouldn't let it escape Earth. Meaning, if those things took over, they'd rot here with the rest of us. And if I failed in this fight, I wouldn't just die, I'd be the last door humanity ever left open. The swarm formed a loose ring around my position, each one pulsing in time with the others. I couldn't tell if they were alive, drones, biomachines, or something worse. My sensors couldn't get a full read. Every time I locked on, my systems scrambled. They were jamming me without technology. I reached back for the sonic blade. empty. Spent in the first fight. I reached to the left plate. Manual fusion spike. Last resort. Trigger it wrong, and it'd take out a mile radius, including me. Fine. I disengaged it from the hip clamp. If I'm the message, I muttered, I might as well be loud. The first wave hit like a dream gone wrong. No footsteps, no sound. They moved like liquid in 3 dimensions, crawling up air, sliding through wind, folding around gravity. I caught the first one mid-jump, slammed it down, crushed its spine under a knee joint. Acid sprayed up and scorched the outer hull. Systems blinked red. 2 more latched onto my back. One peeled open my left thruster, drove a spike into the coolant line. Colossus roared. Not just an alarm, but something deeper. An animal pain through a machine's body. I spun, crushed them against each other, fired a burst from the wrist cannon. Direct energy, tuned for point blank. 2 down. 10 more circling. They weren't attacking like an army. They were dissecting me. Back at Cold Forge, Command scrambled for air options. Drones wouldn't work. Any signal went dead within 200 meters of the swarm. They tried satellites, even redirected a weather manipulator over the desert to try and confuse them. Didn't matter. Nothing broke their pattern. They were locked in on me. One of the scientists watching from orbit said it best. It's not an invasion. It's an evaluation. They're figuring out what makes Mercer tick. And once they figured it out, they'd go after everything else. I made the call. Command, this is Mercer, initiating burn directive. Silence on the other end. Then, say again? You heard me, burn it. They hesitated. Because burn directive meant glass the zone, drop fuel rods from high orbit, ignite the atmosphere, and erase everything in a 20-mile radius, including me. I didn't wait for their confirmation. I set Colossus AI to internal lock and broke the failsafe on the fusion spike. Manual override, full core overload, focused detonation. The warning flashed in my mind. Overload in 90 seconds. The swarm reacted instantly, not like animals sensing danger, more like a hive realizing its lab rat was about to explode. They stopped circling, and they withdrew. Just a few steps, measured, controlled, like they'd gotten what they needed. I watched them rise into the air, slowly, silently, their organic spines twitching in unison. The one under my boot evaporated into mist, its body peeling into light that vanished like ash on the wind. Gone. Just like that. Command broke in, shouting, Mercer, abort burn! Repeat, abort! They're leaving! I stared into the empty sky. Fusion spike still humming. Countdown at 7 seconds. But no enemies left to kill. I gritted my teeth and slammed the emergency cutoff. A burst of pressure slammed through my chest. Every circuit surged. My nose bled inside the cockpit. But the spike shut down. I slumped in the harness, heart thudding like a war drum, lungs aching from pressure feedback. They're gone, I said. Then, they saw what they wanted to see. The aftermath wasn't celebration. It was silence. Governments locked down their satellites. Nations started blaming each other for provoking extraterrestrial interest. The Russians accused the Americans of staging it all to test weapons. China moved 2 fleets into the Pacific. Europe shut its orbital gates entirely. Earth was cracking at the seams. And I was the fracture line. They moved Colossus back into containment, but not for debrief, for dissection. Some of the Cold Forge scientists were talking now. Paranoia boiling over. They said the aliens hadn't come for us, they came for Colossus, for our tech. And that meant I wasn't just a pilot. I was a liability. One night, I woke up to boots outside my door. Not the regular guards. These moved quiet, software professional. I sat up, already reaching for the pulse dagger I kept hidden in the vent above my bed. They didn't knock, didn't announce. The door opened, and 3 black-armored men stepped in. No insignias, no communications, just stun batons. I moved first. The first one caught the dagger in the throat. The second got a broken wrist and a shattered visor. The third actually hit me with the stun baton, but I took it, dropped, and rolled, driving my elbow into his ribs until something cracked. By the time security arrived, the 3 of them were unconscious. I was standing over them, panting, shaking with fury. And the dagger? It wasn't mine. It was Vulnari made. The message was clear. This wasn't about stopping me. This was about removing me before I uncovered more than I was supposed to. When the president called again, I didn't speak. She looked exhausted. Then she said quietly, "They're scared of you, Cole. Not just the aliens, the ones here." I didn't answer. "What you did? It lit a fire no one can put out." I stared at her through the screen. "Then let it burn." I didn't sleep that night. Not after the attempted black bag op. Not after the dagger carved in Vulnari script, a symbol for containment, was left in a dead man's hand. There was only one conclusion. Someone in Earth Command had made a deal, a dirty back-channel agreement with a foreign intelligence. Not for peace, not even for surrender, for control. And they saw me as the last loose thread. They weren't wrong. Cold Forge went into a silent lockdown the next morning. No sirens, no alarms, just an eerie calm, like a tomb. When I walked into the hangar, I didn't see engineers or guards. I saw shadows, watching. Colossus was still docked in the center, wrapped in scaffold arms, sensors lined up like vultures. But something was off. The armor plating near the neural core, gutted, access panels open. The AI interface was stripped, its housing cables dangling like veins pulled from a chest. They were dissecting it, piece by piece. And worse, they were doing it quietly. A man approached, didn't give a name, just held a tablet, face pale, eyes darting. "Orders from above," he muttered. "Colossus is being transferred to Lunar Site Theta. Full decommission. Strategic disassembly." I said nothing. He swallowed. We're keeping your neural imprint. They said we don't need the original anymore, just the data." I turned, looked him dead in the face. "You're taking my mind without consent?" He tried to explain. "We're not taking, we're preserving. You started something too big. We can't afford the original anymore. You're unstable, Mercer. Too tied to the machine. Too volatile." I leaned in close. "Then let me show you how volatile I can be." That night, I took Colossus back. No one saw me coming. 3 guards down in 18 seconds. No killing. Not yet. I dropped into the control core, reconnected the sync cables manually, felt the needle punch my spine, tasted blood in my mouth from the surge. And Colossus woke up. Not just mechanically. It remembered me. The neural bond didn't just resume, it strengthened. All the pain, the fights, the overloads, they'd etched something deeper. I was no longer its pilot. I was its will. Alarms finally started to scream. Security lockdown initiated. Mechs activated. Drones buzzed in. Too late. Colossus tore out of its clamps with a shriek of tortured steel, rose to its full height, and slammed a foot down on the command gantry, collapsing it in a wave of debris. The walls shook. I felt free. I activated a launch vector hard-coded in years ago, a blind zone in the surveillance net, buried in a weather satellite routine. The sky above Cold Forge cracked open, roof panels splitting as emergency thrusters lifted us vertically, flames spitting downward in furious vengeance. They'd wanted to dismantle us. Instead, we escaped. The president went dark. Public channels cut. Military bases issued vague statements about a rogue weapons test. Media showed nothing but reruns and distraction. And behind the scenes, the world began to split not between countries, between loyalties. 2 days later, I landed in Alaska, remote sector. I'd memorized the coordinates during a training op years ago, abandoned radar station. No satellites nearby, just snow, mountains, and silence. Perfect for hiding. But hiding wasn't my plan. The world didn't need silence. It needed a voice. The old transmission towers still worked. Took some rewiring, some old tricks, one lucky satellite that hadn't been decommissioned during the Cold War. And I sent a message. Not to command, not to politicians, to everyone. The broadcast went live at 6:37 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It hijacked comms worldwide for 2 full minutes before they could shut it down. My face, Colossus in the background, the sky behind us streaked with auroras, and my voice, raw and direct. This is Major Cole Mercer. And I'm still alive. I'm not here to apologize. I'm not here to hide. I stood up when others bowed. I struck when others begged. And now they want to erase me because they made a deal. Not for peace, for power. The aliens didn't conquer us. We sold ourselves before they ever fired a shot. I'm telling you the truth. Cold Forge is compromised. Earth Command is fractured. A Shadow Council exists, and they want to hand over control of our planetary defense systems to external advisors. That means aliens. That means subjugation dressed up as guidance. But not all of us agreed. Some of us are still human. If you're hearing this, you have a choice. Kneel or fight. I'll be waiting. The world lost its mind. Within hours, governments scrambled to label me a rogue element, a traitor, a delusional warmonger suffering neural degradation. But the people? They heard something else. They heard truth. The broadcast leaked on pirate channels, was replayed in dark web forums. Officers across multiple divisions refused orders. Even some Cold Forge scientists vanished without a trace. Rumors said they were heading north, toward the mountains. Toward me. I built a camp, set up perimeter scanners, repaired what I could on Colossus with scrap and old military parts. The armor was scorched. The legs still stuttered on full weight shifts. But the core burned steady. It always had. Just like me. And then he showed up, out of nowhere. No heat signature, no footfall. Just appeared at the tree line. A man, middle-aged, clean suit, hands folded behind his back. He stepped forward like he wasn't afraid, and said, "They were right about you." I stood slowly. "Who the hell are you?" He smiled softly. "The cleanup crew. We're not Vulnari. We're something older, something watching from a little further out." My fists clenched. "You part of the Shadow Council?" He laughed. "No, Cole. I'm the reason they exist." I drew my sidearm. He didn't flinch. "I'm here to make you an offer. One time only." "What kind of offer?" He pointed to Colossus. "That isn't enough." I raised the pistol. "It's enough to tear you in half." He shook his head. "But it's not enough to stop what's coming." I stepped forward. "You think I'll work with you?" He shrugged. "You won't have a choice." Then he was gone. Just like that. Back inside the cockpit, I sat in silence. Something was rising. And for the first time, it wasn't aliens that scared me. It was us. The pieces behind the curtain. The human hands pulling strings on both sides of the war. Feeding the Vulnari just enough access. Feeding Earth just enough fear. They didn't want peace. They wanted a new order. And the only thing standing in their way was a man wrapped in scars, rage, and one last machine that refused to bow. 3 weeks after my broadcast, the world finally split. Not in public, not in headlines. In the shadows. 1 minute it was diplomacy, news reports, conferences. The next? Explosions in Geneva. A blackout in Tokyo. 27 military personnel across 5 countries went dark. And in the middle of it, something worse. An official statement from the Earth Coalition Command disavowing my existence. Cole Mercer is no longer recognized as a representative of Earth's defense force. His actions are now considered rogue, unauthorized, and destabilizing. That same day, a full squad of Cold Forge strike troopers raided a military lab in Australia and disappeared with experimental AI chips. They weren't hunting aliens anymore. They were preparing for war against their own. I watched it all from the ridgeline of Alaska, wrapped in cold wind and silence. Colossus loomed behind me, half-repaired, still battle-scarred. But it stood. And so did I. I wasn't alone anymore. 3 ex-commanders had defected and made it to my outpost. A handful of engineers. A cyber warfare specialist who had rerouted old military satellites to keep us off-grid. We didn't have an army. We had resolve. And something even more dangerous. Truth. The group called themselves the Unbound. Not rebels. Not mercenaries. Soldiers who had seen the manipulation firsthand. Who had watched orders get rewritten by invisible chains of command that no one could trace. The chain of command was broken. And from the inside, someone had rigged the entire planet. They told me about Black Signal, a covert protocol recently activated by the Shadow Council. No one knew exactly what it was, but it followed a pattern. Civilian communications were being funneled through off-world encryption filters. Autonomous drones now required satellite pings from external relay nodes. Entire AI grids began operating with delay artifacts, as if they were waiting on approval from somewhere far beyond Earth. Not approval from humans, from them. That night, I took a walk down the canyon. Needed space. The wind bit through my jacket like needles. The mountains whispered like ghosts. And then I heard it, a thrum. Low, mechanical, familiar. I turned fast, weapon raised. From behind the trees stepped a figure I hadn't seen in years. Riley Cade, ex-Black Star pilot, former Cold Forge veteran, discharged after a classified operation in Mars orbit that no one ever officially admitted happened. He was limping, armor scorched, but alive. We stared at each other. Then he grinned. I heard the world was burning. Figured I'd visit the matchstick. Cade brought more than 100 stories. He brought a hard drive, encrypted, sealed in a vault chip, one that was supposed to be destroyed after the failed Operation Firewatch, when Cold Forge secretly tested alien hybrid tech without public knowledge. The data on it? Evidence of a synthetic override protocol. Basically, if the Earth Command structure ever collapsed, a hidden system would seize control of all automated planetary defense assets, including orbital cannons, AI air superiority drones, and satellite arrays. The override codes weren't stored on Earth. They were buried in a Vulnari satellite grid orbiting behind the moon. They'd already planned to lose, and they built a system to hand over control peacefully. To the guiding hand. Their words, not ours. It wasn't just treason, it was betrayal of the human race. They expected us to fold, to be too divided to resist. But they forgot something. They forgot about men like me. We held a meeting in the bunker that night. Engineers, soldiers, off-grid scientists, a few hackers pulled from the ice, smart, angry, and dangerous. I say we crash the override, Cade said. Won't work, one of the hackers replied. It's not just code. The grid is protected by bioencryption, coded to specific DNA samples. You'd need one of the council members alive just to ping the access. Another voice from the corner. What if we don't crack it from the outside? What if we break their relay clean off the sky? Everyone turned to me. I knew what they were suggesting, and I knew what it would cost. We weren't talking about defense anymore. We were talking about taking the first shot. The target, Relay Nexus 5, the primary link between Earth's AI systems and the Vulnari's advisory cloud, located in high Earth orbit, untouchable from the ground, shielded by both Earth's defense satellites and alien interference fields. But there was one way up. A launch system buried under what used to be a civilian spaceport in Baja California. It had been decommissioned. Until recently. We intercepted communications. The Council had reactivated it. They were preparing a new batch of defense advisors for direct interface. They weren't just sending more diplomats. They were sending control units, the kind that didn't need permission, only access. The plan was reckless, impossible, perfect. We'd steal the launch site, override the pad, and fire Colossus straight into orbit using the old emergency lifter. Once there, we'd blow Nexus 5 right out of the sky, cutting Earth free from the alien leash for good. And if we failed, at least we'd make it loud. We moved at night. 3 drop points, 2 decoy vehicles, a suicide comms jammer operated by a volunteer who didn't flinch once when I told him the range wasn't big enough for him to survive the blast. Cade led the southern charge. I led the center. Colossus was split in cargo pods, hauled by refurbished stealth helis that buzzed low over dead highways and shattered towns. The world was falling apart. Governments were collapsing under their own weight. Cities were barricading against foreign influence. And we? We were just trying to keep Earth human. We hit the Baja launch site at 02:46 a.m. Enemy resistance was heavier than expected. Not military, private security, augmented, wired. Eyes glowed with neural sync implants that didn't match any Earth database. One of our techs whispered over comms. "These aren't mercs. They're Vulnari-backed hybrids." We pushed anyway. Cade lost 2 of his team clearing the north gate. My route took us through a utility tunnel crawling with heat mines. I took a hit. Shrapnel tore through my thigh. I didn't stop. By 3:30, we had control of the launch bay. By 3:37, Colossus was whole again. I climbed in. Synced. The burn hit me like a resurrection. Old pain flared. New rage followed. And I said the words I never thought I'd say again. Launch in T-minus 60. The pod doors opened. The lifter ignited. And Earth trembled once more. As we rose, I looked down one last time. At the planet I was about to fight for, and I made a promise, to no one, to everyone. They wanted a slave world. We'll give them a graveyard instead. The sky turned black, then white. My eyes burned as Colossus screamed upward through Earth's atmosphere, every plate of armor groaning with pressure. Heat wrapped the outer hull like a furnace. Flames licked the edges of the canopy, and the whole world blurred into that thin line between blue and nothingness. I was back in the cradle. Synced. Sinking into the machine that had made me more than human and less than safe. Colossus wasn't just a weapon anymore. It was a grudge. And today it was going to burn the sky. We broke through at Mach 6. No return flight. No evac plan. The Baja launch rail was a one-shot elevator, stripped of braking thrusters to make room for more fuel. I wasn't coming back down unless I fell. Didn't matter. I wasn't here for survival. I was here for severance. Up ahead, Relay Nexus 5 floated like a silver tumor, bigger than the schematics had shown. It was no simple satellite. It was a temple. Octagonal structure, over 700 meters wide, locked in place with micro-thrusters and magnetic fields. It glowed faintly with pale blue light, alive with transmission pulses that didn't just relay, they decided. This was the source. The mind behind the whisper, the keystone in a leash Earth never agreed to wear, and I was going to tear it off. My HUD lit up with proximity alerts. 6. No, 8. Targets inbound. They didn't broadcast signatures. No flags, no flight IDs. They weren't human, weren't alien either. They were something in between. Colossus AI, what was left of it, flagged them as adaptive vector interceptors. Unmanned, rapid evolving, no heat trails, no exhaust. They flew with grace, not thrust. I didn't wait. Engaging, I muttered. And then the sky became war. The first AV interceptor came in low, weaving around orbital debris like it had been born there. It opened with a silent EMP pulse, trying to knock out my visual feed. I closed my left eye, rerouted power, and lunged. Colossus grabbed the thing mid-flight, crushed its sleek form into twisted shards, and hurled it into a communications tower that exploded like a solar flare. No time to breathe. The second came from above, slicing down with a plasma filament so thin it almost went unnoticed, until it burned halfway through my shoulder plating. I countered with a pulse blast from my right forearm cannon. It missed, deliberately. The thing was learning. Colossus was built for destruction, not agility. But I wasn't here to dance. I was here to bleed the system dry. Target, Nexus 5 Central Hub. Route trajectory, I commanded. The HUD pinged red. Too many interceptors. Too much shield interference. I'd need to go straight through. Override manual control. Prioritize ramming sequence. The AI hesitated. Warning. Direct impact may result in total pilot fatality. I exhaled. I know. Confirm? Confirmed. Colossus dropped into a nosedive. Below me, the Nexus glinted with cold purpose, its signal lights flashing faster, picking up the threat. 3 more interceptors shot in from the side, trying to clip my wings. I launched twin missiles at one, ejected decoy flares at another, and tanked the third full on. The impact cracked my cockpit, the outer plating buckling, alarms screaming, but I didn't stop. Colossus roared like a dying star, its thrusters pushing past max capacity. We hit the outer shell of Nexus 5 like a meteor, and punched through. The internal structure wasn't metal. It was grown. Walls curved like bone. Lights pulsed in irregular biological rhythms. I skidded through a hall the size of an aircraft carrier, crashing into what looked like a neural web. Fiber optics wired into living tissue. My cockpit hissed, filled with smoke. Oxygen dropped. I tore off the breathing mask, pulled the emergency override lever. The canopy ejected. Air hissed out into the vacuum until the internal atmosphere shields kicked in. And then I was standing, alone, in the belly of the machine that had held Earth hostage. It was silent. Too silent. I walked down a curving platform, my boots echoing like blasphemy. And then the voice came, not from speakers, from inside my skull. "You are late," I turned, nothing there. "We saw your kind, raging, weeping, demanding. We offered peace. You responded with pain," I snarled. "You never offered peace, you offered obedience. Peace is obedience. You mistake the two because you still believe in choice." I reached into my side holster, pulled the short-burst plasma pistol, a relic, limited charge, but enough to rip a hole in anything too close. "Where are you?" "Everywhere. You stand in the brain of the system that would have saved your kind. And now you wish to kill the very thing that would have ended your war." I laughed bitterly. "You're not ending anything. You're just replacing the enemy with yourselves. That is the price of evolution. Chaos replaced by control. Suffering replaced by silence. And yet you insist on bleeding. You are inefficient, self-consuming, broken." I aimed the pistol at the core, a pale blue structure pulsing slowly, like a sleeping god's heart. "Maybe." I took a step closer. "But at least we choose what breaks us." And I fired. The core screamed, not in sound, but in waves of emotion. Pain, disbelief, horror. The structure cracked open, veins of data bleeding into the air as static. Sparks rained down. Power failed. The lights dimmed. The voice in my head turned to noise. I ran. Back toward Colossus. Back toward the war still boiling outside. Interceptors were crashing. Without guidance, they spun off into nothing, collided with each other, disintegrated into dead mass. Colossus was on one knee, reactor flickering, one arm severed. I climbed inside anyway, wired in. "Reignite core." Warning, system compromised. I said reignite, and the reactor obeyed. We launched from the corpse of Nexus 5 like a phoenix made of ruin. Earth lay below, still whole, still shackled, but now the lock was broken, and the key burning in orbit. I didn't land. There was nowhere left for me. Not yet. I took Colossus to the upper stratosphere, hid among old defunct satellites, and waited. Because the next move? It wouldn't be theirs. It would be ours. Back on Earth, the reaction was immediate. The network collapse triggered chaos across the Council's infrastructure. AI drones lost sync. Orbital gates froze. Power grids flickered. Entire regions disconnected from the alien optimization stream. And for the first time in nearly a year, humans were in charge of their own systems again. They called it the Mercer Drop. Millions cheered. But the Council didn't. They responded with the only language they had left: occupation. Within 48 hours, advisors deployed. Not in space, on the ground. 12 drop pods fell into high-density population zones: London, Lagos, São Paulo, New York. They weren't there to talk. They were there to restore order. The media called them peacekeepers. I knew better. They were replacement governors. Synthetic minds wearing alien tech, designed to pacify populations, subdue resistance, and create the illusion of consent. But they didn't count on one thing. They didn't count on the fire they'd just relit. They called it a restabilization effort. 12 advisor units, each dropped into Earth's major regions, tasked with monitoring post-breach anomalies, which was their polite way of saying take control and erase resistance. But the world had changed since Nexus 5 went dark. They'd cut the leash. And for the first time in generations, humanity wasn't a colony of influence anymore. It was a problem, one the advisors were now deployed to solve. I watched the first public pacification live through a hijacked drone feed. New York, downtown. One of the advisor units walked through Times Square like it owned it. 12 feet tall, armored in alien alloy, cloaked in signal-jamming mist. Its voice didn't speak through speakers. It hijacked minds. People froze. Some obeyed. Some dropped to their knees like it was holy. The rest disappeared. Not killed, just deleted. Reality trembled for a second where they had been. And then, nothing. Like they were a bad line of code erased mid-execution. I gritted my teeth. Not again. I brought Colossus back to Earth 2 days later. No authorization, no support, no backup, just a one-way descent toward the one city where the Council thought they'd already won. London. That's where the Command Advisor set up its hub. Deep beneath the ruins of Parliament. Layers of pulse shielding, defense grids, repurposed Earth drones reprogrammed to act as enforcers. The British government had fled to bunkers. But I wasn't going underground to negotiate. I was going down to rip out the rot. The Unbound were already active in the area. Small cells, disorganized, scattered. But when I landed, their comms lit up like wildfire. Mercer's here. They'd heard the stories. The escape from Cold Forge, the Nexus kill, the orbital stand. But now they saw it for real. A mountain of war steel crashing through London's dead skies, engines screaming vengeance, and footsteps shaking the old world order from its hollow shell. People didn't need orders. They just rose. We launched the final assault on daybreak. They came from alleys, sewers, shattered churches, rooftops, armed with old rifles, jury-rigged mechs, EMP launchers stolen from collapsed police stations. They had no chance against an advisor. But they weren't there to win. They were there to break its rhythm. I was the hammer. They were the blade. And together, we turned London into a storm. The advisor stood in the crater that used to be Westminster Abbey. Its body gleamed in the ash light. Limbs split into modular tools. Its chest opened and revealed a prism, pulsing, watching, absorbing. It didn't speak in words. It just projected a message across every mind in the city. You had your chance. This is mercy, not subjugation. Lay down your will. Return to order. I answered with a punch that shattered 6 city blocks. Colossus struck like a tectonic plate in motion. The advisor staggered, not from damage, but surprise. It had faced rebellions. But never me. It raised one arm, fired a gravity shear. I countered by activating Colossus' core surge. Redirected all power to the outer chassis, hardening every joint. The shear bounced. We clashed in a dance of brute force and alien precision. They had code. I had conviction. They had systems. I had rage. It dragged me across the bridge over the Thames, slamming me into concrete. I fired back with pulse rounds, scoring hits across its torso. Each one caused flickers of disruption across its form. But not pain. They didn't feel pain. That's why they couldn't understand us. I used that. As we fought, the Unbound pressed their own assault. On the relay beacons, the satellite routes, the mobile AI spires spreading through the underground like mold. They took losses, but they made holes. And through those holes, hope bled in. 10 minutes into the fight, the advisor adapted. It shed its outer armor, revealing a second form. Taller, faster, sharper, a blade extended from its forearm. No ceremony, just the intent to kill. I triggered the emergency overdrive. Colossus surged. Systems overheated, the core screamed. But I held, I charged. We collided again. Metal screamed, earth cracked, the city wept. I stabbed the seismic anchor into the advisor's lower body and activated the mass drive. The ground collapsed beneath us both. We dropped into the earth, through centuries of history and broken stone, into the vaults beneath the old government buildings. Nowhere left to run, nowhere to fly, just death. One of us would leave this pit, one of us wouldn't. The advisor tried to interface, hijack my thoughts, override Colossus from within. It forced itself into my neural net, whispering simulations of surrender, illusions of family, memories twisted into chains. I almost broke, almost, but the thing forgot one thing. I'd died years ago. What was left was fire. I fed Colossus every last drop of power. The fusion core cracked. Radiation alarms blared. My body shut down in places. Left arm gone. Legs numb. Spine cold. Didn't matter. I pushed the sonic blade forward, slowly, inch by inch, into the advisor's core. It screamed, not out loud, but across the psychic air. A wail so raw it made blood drip from my nose and burn down my throat. And then, silence. The explosion swallowed the sky. The abbey collapsed inward, a sinkhole of light and fury. Debris rained, sirens echoed. Then, nothing. Just dust. They found me 2 hours later, dragged out of the wreck by Unbound medics who couldn't believe I was breathing. Half my body was gone. The rest was a mess of broken circuits and raw will, but I was alive, and the advisor was not. Across the planet, the rest shut down. Linked through Hive protocol, the death of the Prime shattered their cohesion. They powered off mid-sentence, mid-step, mid-command. People stared in silence, then erupted. Across cities, slums, war zones, people flooded the streets. They tore down the advisor towers, ripped out their core spires, burned their synthetic shrines. Earth was ours again. Not peaceful, not united, but ours. I spent 6 months in recovery. No parades, no statues. I didn't want them. They offered me medals. I tossed them in the snow. They offered me a seat on the new council. I told them to burn it. I wasn't there to be honored. I was there to remind them what it cost. I walk with metal now, breathe with half a lung. One eye is a sensor port. The other? Still human, still watching. And somewhere out there, beyond the stars, they know what we are now. Not compliant, not soft, not evolved. We are what we've always been. Flawed, fierce, free. And the next time someone sends diplomats, we'll answer again, not with submission, but with a Colossus-Class statement.